see, do we have our newest member here?
No, he called me last night and he says he has a conflict, is not able to make it today.
Okay, and
But you
that's,
do have a new member that wasn't here the last time.
oh, okay.
Joanna Nelson.
Hi. Okay, great. Thank you.
So if you want to do a welcome, you can.
Okay, I will, but let's go ahead and I'll call the meeting to order. And Fabian, would you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Counselor Vihil Koppler.
Here, finally.
Melissa Coleman. Hi, Melissa. Megan McGarity. There you go. Ryan Cordova.
Hi, everybody.
John Fines.
Good morning.
Ryan Gallagher. Oh, he's excused, excuse me. Robert Lurcott.
In the vicinity.
Kate Kennedy.
Here.
Johanna Nelson.
Here.
And Victoria Murphy.
Fabian and Joe, I just got a text from Victoria. She's getting error messages trying to get into the meeting. So Joe, what should I tell her?
Should I send her another link maybe, or restart her computer and start it up again? That would probably be the best thing to do. She might have her Zoom on from a previous meeting, so she's still signed into this other meeting.
So she just should sign off Zoom, not restart her computer, or
She can reset. Yeah, if she wants to do that too, she can. Yes, yes, ma'am.
okay. And then maybe you should send her another link so she has it right in front of her. Would that work?
Yeah, we can do that too.
Okay, so I'm imagining she'll figure it out. So welcome everybody. I'm wanting to say that we do have another new member, Ryan Gallagher, and I guess the next meeting when he attends, we'll introduce him. But Johanna, since this is your first meeting, do you want to just welcome? And I'll welcome you, and we all welcome you. Do you want to just say a little bit about your background?
Sure. Thank you, Counselor. It's great to be here. I'm really excited. My background is I've been a small business owner for almost, 15-ish years. I currently have a small business here in Santa Fe. And then I also have been working in economic development for the last 10 years as a business advisor and marketing, statewide planning, and now I work for the State Economic Development Department. And my background is specifically in development finance. And I'm so excited to participate, and it's an honor to be here with you all. And I hope that I can be of help and of service. So thank you so much.
Great. Well, welcome aboard. So the next item is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes from staff?
Fabian, any changes? Oops. I don't see Fabian on here. Madam Chair, I don't think there's any changes from staff, but we've lost Fabian.
Well, now you're it, Rich.
I now should tag you're it.
So maybe, do you want to say anything about the FIR for agenda item?
Oh, yeah.
7A?
Fabian, yes. So yeah, there was changes. Sorry, that's true. We have updated the FIR for agenda item. I think it's H. I'm not looking at the document right now for the land sale strategy resolution.
Right, 7A.
7A. We've updated the financial impact report, which is FIR, that has been updated. And also we have, I think Fabian didn't back yet, we've uploaded some of the progress reports from Midtown that we submitted on the 10th. So those are in the PrimeGov document. So there's lots of homework reading. But we'll talk about the FIR today, and we'll work through a presentation on Midtown after we talk about the resolution first.
Okay, and then I just want to state for the note keeping that Victoria Murphy has joined us. Okay, so do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Fabian, will you please call for the voice vote?
Absolutely. Counselor Vihil,
Yes.
Melissa Coleman,
Yes.
Megan McGarity,
Yes.
Ryan Cordova,
Yes.
John Fines,
Yes.
Robert Lurcott,
Yes.
Kate Kennedy,
Yes.
Johanna Nelson,
Yes.
Victoria Murphy.
Yes.
So that's it, it passes.
Now I'm in a meeting.
Passes
Okay,
unanimously, Counselor.
next item is approval of the minutes. Oh, no, approval of consent agenda. We have none. So next item is item 5, approval of the minutes for January 29th, 2021. Are there any changes from staff?
No changes from staff.
Thank you. Anyone on the committee have any changes? See none. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
Great, it's been moved and seconded. Fabian, will you please call for the voice vote?
Will do. Counselor Vihil Coppler,
Yes?
Melissa Coleman,
Yes.
Megan McGarity,
Yes.
Ryan Cordova,
Yes.
John Fines,
Yes.
Robert Lurcott,
Yes.
Kate Kennedy,
Yes.
Joanna Nelson,
Yes.
Victoria Murphy.
Yes.
You have motion passes, Counselor.
Okay, thank you. Next item is item 6, consent. No items on consent. Next item 7, action items discussion. Consideration of resolution 2021 we don't have a number yet. A resolution requiring governing body approval prior to announcing the availability of any city-owned land. Who's not on mute? We need. Let's see. There you go. Thank you. A resolution requiring governing body approval prior to announcing the availability of any city-owned land, buildings, or other real property for sale. And we have Andreas Salazar here and Rich Brown. So I'm not sure. Rich or Andrea, anybody want to speak to this first? Or not at all?
I think you're on mute.
Story of my day. I was on mute, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Story of my week.
We're never going to get used to this.
We'll do it. So, Madam Chair, what I would love to do is have you talk about the resolution as you're the sponsor. So then you can sort of tee up the resolution, and then Andrea and I can provide some context of work
Okay.
that so far, and then we can go into a Q&A with the committee if you'd like to do that.
Okay, I'd be happy to.
Thanks.
This resolution has been through Public Works Utilities. It's been to Finance Committee. No, first governing body, then Finance Committee, and then it's going back to governing body next week. Just the intent, and I'll keep it simple, the intent of the resolution is to bring to the governing body suggestions or proposals, a proposal from staff, whether the city should consider selling a piece of property that's over $25,000. And so that there can be agreement and a vote from governing body on whether we want to sell a particular parcel. And then if the governing body votes yes, then staff will go and do all the things that staff does now, depending on how that property will be sold, whether it's a land swap, whether it's going to be put out for bid, or whether Andrea may talk about the 4 or 5 ways we sell property. But then staff goes out and procures a buyer. And then at any time we can discuss, negotiate, or any particular pieces of the property that need to go into executive session. We certainly can still do that. This doesn't negate that. But the intent is to get agreement from the governing body that any particular parcel, we would all agree by voice vote that we all want to sell. This precludes having staff go out and doing all the work, procuring a buyer, negotiating, and then perhaps come to the governing body, and all of a sudden, we're not in agreement that we don't want to sell. Or we decide we don't want to sell. So that's it in a nutshell. And I think I'll turn it back to Rich, and then you go from there.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So what I'm going to do next, working with Andrea Salazar, the staff on our legal team, she's our partner, is just take you through some context of why we started to look at our underperforming assets. And what our plan was. Originally, we discussed all of these documents in parcels in executive session, but I wanted to sort of start this process of putting some sunlight on these issues. As I stated before, I'm on the record that I do support the resolution, but now it's a matter of getting through the committee review process. It's been the Public Works, it's been the Finance Committee, and it's being reworked and brought to the governing body for next week. So I have screen shareability, and I'm going to let's see.
Rich, I forgot one thing, if I may.
Sure.
This won't apply to Santa Fe Estates. As you know, this committee has reviewed an entire informational proposal from Andrea Salazar before, some time ago. And that property is well on its way, and this would not include that.
Not, that's correct.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. So Andrea and I will take you through sort of the history and what we prepared for the Finance Committee, which just happened on the 15th. So as I said before, this is a land sales resolution for public offering. And so these next couple slides will kind of give you a sense of where we are. It kind of level sets us so that when we reach the governing body meeting on the 24th and it's approved, this is the type of information sharing we will have. Some things that provide liability, public trust, harm will go through executive session, but most of the documentation will be discussed in public. The other thing I also want to make clear that every single parcel the city owns has some issue attached to it. So some parts of what we're trying to do to get it to a clean version, I call it shovel ready. Once it gets to shovel ready portion, some will be executive session, but mostly we will debate the opportunity to public offer it in the regular public discussion. So with that, I'm going to ask Andrea to sort of talk about the options for disposition of real property as it relates to our regulations.
Thanks, Rich. Good afternoon. So the authority that kind of governs the city, that does govern the city, is state statute. And so the ways that the city can dispose of a property, there are really only 5 ways: a private sale, a public sale. Both of those are terms of art under the statute. And I'm happy to read you what those terms and definitions are, or not, because they are long, but those 2 types are defined under the statute: request for proposals, exchange or donate, swap, that kind of stuff with state or local governments, city, county, public schools, that type of organization, or donate the property pursuant to the Local Economic Development Act, LEDA, or Affordable Housing Act. So those are the 5 ways that we can dispose of real property.
Great. And then starting in the June of 2019, the discussion of disposition of properties started to happen. Whoops, something happened with my PowerPoint. Sorry about that. I can talk through it. So again, starting in June of 2019, we talked about the various goals that we had in mind for disposing of our parcels and properties. At the time, I was not the director of economic development, so I was not involved particularly with the June 2019 meeting, but I come on in October of 2019 and started to take this strategy and move it forward. At that time, we had a different asset development manager, Kevin Kellogg, and actually today, I think Sean Moody is on this call today. Sean Moody is our new asset development manager, but in the previous time, Kevin started in June 19, and then he and I worked through what these actual goals are: maximizing the city's investments, turning and taking non-performing assets and getting them off the books, and then looking at using some of the windfall money to look at different goals we had. One basically was housing, and then building trust through transparency, where we were bringing these parcels and the information through to the governing body, but through executive session before they went out. But all parcels, if they were up for sale, had to come to the governing body once we had a recommendation. So there was a public debate on the sales, but not necessarily on the public offering part. So this resolution sort of moves that to a new process. One key thing I want to also mention to everyone, that back in January of 2020, I had met with the governing body to say, I am predicting that we're going to have an economic crisis, and we need to be prepared for this economic crisis. That is the reason why I want to really look at our underperforming assets and be strategic about them. So I told them at the time that I thought at the end of FY21, which is now, that we needed to have all these deals closed, because we're going to have to work on ways to stimulate the economy, figure out ways where economic recovery and resiliency is put in place. And we will need that with some sort of revenue and funding to make sure some of these programs are in place. We've been doing some of it with CARES grant money, but as you know, the city is facing a deficit crisis because we're still convulsing from the economic downturn and the pandemic. So this was something I discussed in January. So this procedure and strategy of getting to our parcels and getting them in front of the governing body has been discussed since January, because it was a part of one of the goals I had when I came on board. So, Ranjari, if you could take us through the process here.
So right now, currently, the internal process that we have developed regarding selling real property is that city staff has developed this based on our discussions with governing body. So the city will obtain an appraisal to move forward with selling any piece of property, place a public notice that the real property is for sale. And currently we have a team that is creating both ads for the New Mexican and the Reporter, and has a website for our assets. So those will be our public announcement piece. Staff will accept offers for no less than a 60-day period for during the public notice period. And then staff will present those offers to governing body. Once a sale is accepted and we have the terms, so a purchase agreement and all those terms pursuant to state statute, we have to go through an ordinance process where we draft an ordinance that has the purchase agreement attached to it, and that moves forward through public hearing. Then if it is over a $25,000 mark in the appraisal, there's a referendum period for 45 days after that ordinance is approved, and the public could file a petition that they would like that to go on the ballot as a question. If that doesn't happen, a petition, then we close after the 45-day period. And so that is the normal, what we have been going through. What this does, this resolution, is before we start this process or before we even make notice, we go to governing body and they have it as an action item after an executive session to say, yes, we want to sell this. It would be a presentation about what that asset is. Then the governing body would, vote on whether to move forward with sale or not. Once that occurs, then staff would do all of these steps.
Great, thanks. Okay. And then if you could now sort of take us through some of the assets that have been under consideration over the last.
Sure. So we have several new members at EDAC, and we have talked about Santa Fe Estates before, but probably a number of you might not know what that is. Currently, it is listed as Las Estrellas. It had been previously listed as Santa Fe Estates because that was the development group that owned the property that we had been in an agreement with. And so it's still listed for us as Santa Fe Estates internally. But during the course of the year, we had executive sessions with the governing body about this area. We were terminating an agreement that we had with Santa Fe Estates, and then the property became the city's. And so we were talking about how we are strategizing to move forward. It's about 250 acres. It's already a master planned area. It doesn't have infrastructure beyond. It has connectivity roads, but it doesn't have roads in the actual acreage that we're taking on. The city did obtain an appraisal on March 19th, 2020. It's approximately $4 million. We already had started receiving, Rich received a lot of interest. So 6 interested parties had already told him that they were interested in making an offer. And then we started the public notice, and that entire process that we laid out has already started for Santa Fe Estates in February. So right now, Sean and I are working on moving that forward, and he has scheduled a panel for anyone who is interested in making an offer to ask questions. And that's happening, I believe, on Thursday.
Thursday, the 18th, that's correct.
So the other assets that we had talked about, and these are what are queued up, are Warehouse 21 and the Market Station Suite 200 that the city owns. We already have appraisals for both of these pieces of property. The city's Warehouse 21 building was approximately $2 million. The Suite 200, approximately 3.6. We've received letters of interest on both of these properties. And so right now we're working on, once this resolution is approved, then these would be items that we would be taking up at governing body for action to see if the governing body does want to move forward in selling both of these assets. Boys and Girls Club is another asset that we have talked about. This is also another asset that will be up for discussion once we once the resolution moves forward. This is a little bit more of a complicated asset. So the city owns the building. Boys and Girls Club did own the land. As of January 2021, Boys and Girls Club has sold the land. Back in October, Boys and Girls Club, knowing that they had an interested party, they had made an offer because we had already obtained an appraisal for the building of $400,000. They had made an offer of $425,000 to buy the building, and we were asked to put the asset on the market potentially, or and figure out how to move forward. But we have held back on that because there are some complicated issues because the land has already been sold. So this is something that we will be going to governing body to talk about in executive session and then have as an action item to move forward.
Right. Right.
So the reason we had the Santa Fe Clay building, this is the only asset that the city has sold from 2020 to the present. This is probably the starting asset that had a lot of the public interested in, the city selling. Why are we selling buildings? This asset in particular was in a lease and management agreement by the Santa Fe Rail Yard Community Corporation, and they basically lease and manage out the entire rail yard for the city. Our agreement with them goes through 2030. And so this building and the underlying ground was in that lease. And they had the ability to lease out both the building, even though the building was owned by the city, and the ground. They had an interested party who wanted to purchase the building because they wanted to put like $1 million worth of improvements and needed to own the asset outright. And so they came to the city with a queued up buyer already, and the city had an ordinance and accepted that offer. It was approved January 29th. It took us a year to close for different reasons related to COVID, but this is the only sale that has been finalized, and it closed on December 31st of 2020.
Yeah. And so at the end of our slides here, we sort of talked earlier about the fiscal impact report. Part of the documentation that comes with a resolution is that you have to provide a fiscal impact report. And originally I thought that the process, that there'd be extra committee meetings on top of a governing body meeting. it turns out that we don't. We can still go to executive session. And I also erroneously thought that our staff time would involved in those extra meetings would be a fiscal impact that would impact each parcel discussion, and it does not. So I've taken that cost out of the fiscal impact report, but there will be some impact because most of the parcels that we've just discussed in the previous slides had appraisals done prior to March of 2020 or up to 2020, and they only last about a year. So if we get to another phase where we're about to put a parcel up for or asset up for a public offering, we may have to purchase another appraisal, and that is the fiscal impact that I'll have to use against any funding that I have in my department. So that's kind of the overview of it, and then we're up for discussion from that standpoint. But we wanted to give you some context and have Madam Chair talk about the resolution that's moving through the system, and I think it's in the governing body on the 24th. But it currently is in the amendment change phase, I think, Madam Chair, is that correct?
Yes, and the amendments have been worked out, and they'll make their way to the governing body agenda. And I already basically overviewed the resolution, including the amendments. So I don't have anything new to add to that, which was the $25,000 and making more clarification on when or making more clarification that going into executive session isn't precluded, you know, from the resolution, from the governing body isn't precluded from going into executive session.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so I'll open up discussion. Does anybody have any questions or any comments on this? Megan?
Megan.
I was wondering how this process introduces efficiencies into what we're already doing. From the presentation, it sounded a little bit as though some of the disposition of this property had been discussed already in before you came on board, Rich. And so I'm just curious if these things had already been in the pipeline, and if this committee's charge is still to provide ways to make it easier to do business in Santa Fe. How does this resolution make things more efficient?
I'll take that. The resolution isn't necessarily to make things more efficient. The way I see it, the work that staff does is still going to be the same work. It's just a matter of on the timeline when that happens. And sometimes it'll be exactly the same as it is now. But what this does do is it gives notice to the public via discussion in open session during a council meeting that we're considering selling land. When we were in the process of selling the Santa Fe Clay building, everything was done prior. We had a buyer, we had all that done, and then we went to the governing body to approve the agreement. And the public was quite frankly very upset and let us know that they didn't know we were selling that building, and maybe they would have been interested. And so there's that, you know, it's providing notice to the public through an open discussion rather than an executive session that we're considering selling a piece of property. And it's just more of a transparency issue. And then the other thing is, it allows for discussion in executive session, which we do now. But if we're getting consensus, you can't vote in executive session. But what was happening is we'd go through and maybe make a consensus decision, but we didn't come out of executive session and vote. So what this does is it clarifies it, and it's in the interest of providing more information and clarity and transparency to the public. And then it allows the city council to vote. And many times that's going to be, you know, probably a 100% agreement. Maybe it's not, but it would also give the public a chance to chime in through public comment like we do now on how they feel about something. They'll give us ideas rather than after the fact. So if anybody on staff wants to add to that, you're welcome to do so.
Sure, Madam Chair, thank you. I'll just add just one more thing is that I think you're right that we with this resolution, we will have a lot more transparency and the efficiency piece will still be there. Keep in mind that we did discuss all of these properties prior to this date today, but when we discussed them and got that consensus, we had a lot of diligence work to do. So we were just doing more diligence work after we got that consensus before we were ready to even put it onto the market. So some of the notes, some of the documents, or I'm sorry, some of the assets you saw there, we were queuing them up. So the one that was queued up was the Boys and Girls Club, and then we are now back to the diligence board because there's still more work to be done. So the Councilor Koppler is correct that we will have the opportunity to discuss it, whatever private matters that happen in the executive session, and then anything else can be discussed transparently. But this will still probably include some diligence. But we hopefully in the last year we've done most of what needs to be done so that we can hand it over to Sean for the public offering process.
Okay, thank you, Rich. I have hands up from Johanna and John. I don't know which one of you raised it first. So I guess, Johanna, you're new. I'll let you.
Okay, thanks. I think it was John. Thank you, Counselor. In regard to the new website that was created, I think I'm understanding that was created. Just for a point of clarity, is that website, is that more of a marketing tool for the sale of the properties, or is that to aid in transparency and getting information out to the public as well?
Madam Chair, Member Nelson, thank you for the question. Yes, it's both. It's more of a marketing tool. We needed a specific space to sort of market for these public offerings. It's just another channel. There's newspapers, there's radio interviews, there's Facebook, all those channels are there. Plus the website's just another channel to market it. It also is an information-rich area that people can go to. Our current city website is a little clunkier to sort of be able to be nimble about how to market properties and put documents there. So we created the microsite for that purpose. So that's one of the main reasons why we created that microsite to have a place where we can put all the assets in one, and then we can market to there and link it out when Sean and I are getting inquiries and letters of intent.
Thank you, Rich. I have one comment to make, if I may.
Sure.
I think the website is great. I was exploring it, I think a week ago or whenever the press went out on it. I have a comment on if there's a value to post to aid in transparency, if there's a value to add the actual sale notices of the sale and the prices or upcoming meetings. I think that would aid in terms of getting information out as well. But okay, thank you for your comment.
Okay, thank you. John, you're next, and then Robert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick line item question. Oh, and let me also echo the comment about the microsite. Really like that. It shows that a lot of times, not just city government, but for any businesses that might be watching, a lot of times our web executions can fall short in our community. And that's a good example of, a quick, easily navigable, functional, good site. So that's doable, and it's always a good idea. Everything is communications are so web-based. So good job on that. I was glad to see that. Quick line item question before I make some comments about the resolution. The $4 million for Las Estrellas, is there something holding that down? And I freely admit my understanding of Santa Fe real estate is essentially a layman's, but I try to understand it and pay attention to it and educate myself on it. That seems like a sweetheart deal for a lot of acreage in a pretty sweet part of northern New Mexico. So I'm just trying to understand and again, the market will handle it. So this is a small question, but just for my own and perhaps other members of the committee's edification, is there anything holding that price down?
Madam Chair, I'm going to see if Sean possibly could answer the question, but keep in mind that this is based upon an appraisal. We're not expert appraisal, so we had to have an expert appraisal come with that response. So, but maybe Sean or Andrea could answer your question if the market, the appraisal is not to the level of what we think. But Sean or Andrea, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'd be happy to take a stab, and Andrea, jump right in. Good question. This is really, we're selling 7 essentially non-contiguous parcels. They're master planned for something over 200 houses, market rate and affordable. And it's the infrastructure that is built is serving previous subdivisions. So the roads have common infrastructure, but the parcels have no roads or infrastructure. They're pretty raw. What we're selling is not merely the fee simple parcels, those 7 parcels, but also the previous developers enduring rights and obligations, and they'll be. We acquired them in quitclaim, which speaks to the fact that you could say that neither Santa Fe Estates nor the city was quite sure of what it was getting its arms around, but that's what we'll be conveying. Again, most likely by quitclaim, but it's and then in terms of the land
It's
itself.
a special warranty deed. Sorry, the
Thank you.
land is a special warranty.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks. But that means that all of the enduring rights and obligations across Santa Fe Estates, including that common area, some of which is dedicated for roads and public land, open land, and some of which again is dedicated for housing and a small commercial, light commercial area as well. But all in, John, I'm taking advantage of this to describe it in better detail. That's about $4 million for about 220 acres, and again, some portion of that is earmarked for open space, and really the value has been looked at by the appraisal as primarily driven by the amount of housing that will take.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Yeah, just wanted to, and I know it came up before the committee before, so forgive me if I'm asking a question later in the cycle. It just, every time I see that number, I think, yeah, where can I get 4 mil? I'll take it. So anyway, as for the resolution, when I first saw the packet, I thought that we had a, forgive the term, but something of a rubber stamp, not a lot to debate or think about here. But because I saw that one counselor voted no in finance and one abstained, which I feel like if I did that, I'd be asking to be roasted by my constituents at this stage. I felt like I better, just take a minute and share my thoughts about transparency and governance in our community here in Q1 2021 or Q3 in the fiscal year. Look, my feeling about some of the fiber, the character that makes Santa Fe so unique and so special is the people here are craftspeople. They do things the right way. And obviously we see that in our artists, our restaurants, our cultural custodians. You see it with Kiwanis at Zozobra. Despite the pandemic, they put on a magnificent show, adhering to all of these crazy plague rules. And you go right down the line. But it's not just those tourist-friendly, upfront, big tent items like Canyon Roads, the restaurants. I got stucco work done on my place, and this guy was the Michelangelo of stucco. I mean it. I mean, he cared about each and every detail. And I remember once when I worked for the city and I literally stepped out of the heel of a new pair of boots. I was appalled. And I went to a cobbler late on a Friday, and he had this dusty old shop, and he fixed it for me. He charged me like $3. I couldn't, and I gave him, $10. So these are just a couple of little examples. It goes on and on and on. You go to Spanish Market, one more example. Somebody puts 30 hours into a Spanish colonial tradition that I'm told some of which you can't find in Spain any longer. 30 hours to create a piece, and then tries to sell it for $150 at Spanish Market. They don't do that for the money. They do it for our community, for our culture, for our integrity, for our craft and our tradition of craft. And you just find that all across our community. And that's why we get the tourists. And that's why we get people choosing to live here, retire. They can choose any destination in the world. And the lagging aspect of our community, the piece of our community that does not fulfill that fiber, that DNA, that ethos, unfortunately, is our city government too often. And I don't want to draw too broad of a stroke. Again, I work for city government, and I'm the first to tell people, you've got real dedicated employees. They are not all counting the days to retirement. They are not all in it for the benefits by any means. And the Economic Development Department is a department that does a lot with a little and fights for our community. But overall, and unfortunately, as I dare say at some of the leadership levels of our government, we haven't been getting transparency. We haven't been getting craft. We've been getting broken promises. We've been getting dinged on our finances. We've been getting dinged. We got dinged on Midtown transparency. We had a year about potholes. We had a year about weeds. The clay building. I mean, you know, you sit here and you say, everybody is getting outbid by Texas money and California money, and nobody can afford to buy here. The businesses are getting pushed out of downtown. They're giving up after 20 years. They can't pay rent. Everything here is under massive duress. And we put a rail yard building up for sale for less than market value? I mean, it's an outrage. And so that in and of itself demands that we codify this resolution and make it law. And how any counselor could vote against that, even if it means a little extra work, because that's the thing about governance. It does mean extra transparency. It is extra work. And constituents will wear you down sometimes. And, you know, it requires extra phone calls, extra time with the media. That's, if you don't like it, go into private service. You know, it's a piece of cake compared to public service. But there's benefits to public service, and there's you assume a lot of responsibility. And when you take that job, every single person in Santa Fe does have a piece of you. They have the right to call you out. They have the right to call you up, to email you and say, why this, why that? Didn't you think about this? Where was this? Why wasn't I told about this? That comes with, and it's correct and it's right. And it's the way governance works. And so you have to be a craftsperson of government. You have to err on the side of transparency, err constantly, hour by hour, day by day, err on the side of what's public law and what's right for a constituent, even when even when you're already struggling to get everything done and make it all happen. It's doable. The good leaders in government find. They bring in entrepreneurship, they bring in experience from the private sector, and they find ways to deal with bureaucracy, the exigencies of unionism and public transparency. Good craftspeople make that happen. And unfortunately, we're in a time where it hasn't been happening nearly enough. And so people are exhausted, they're raw, and it gets exacerbated by other things in society, fairly or unfairly. We had 8 years of New Mexico government up until a year or two ago that was hideous. And we just came out of 4 years of federal governance, regardless of party, 4 years of federal governance that was just not at all and cataclysmic in some examples. And so all that, and we've got this plague. So government has to understand, all right, government has a bad name right now. People are stressed, major, historically right now. You have to embrace that. You have to lead. You have to take that on. And so I won't continue to pontificate or speechify, but people in this community need transparency. They need to know things are being done above the board, in consultation, and the right way. And so we don't want to sit around and see asset, because everything looks like a bro deal to us, right? In New Mexico, everything looks, we're ready to pounce. And that's just, right or wrong. And so if we're going to come out of this pandemic and this time in this election year in a positive way, in the best way that we can and minimize the damage, we need that public-private partnership, relationship, reality. We need it to be strong, and it's a rising tide that lifts all boats. That's a Pollyannish thing to say, but if we're going to attract people to our community, get people to make businesses where businesses have failed, buy those outrageous downtown rents and start their dream, if all this is going to happen, then we need city government to lead free to core, to create an environment of positivity and possibility and confidence and trust. So I feel tremendously strongly about this. And again, I'm sure this will pass, and it's something of a no-brainer. But to see councilors standing up against it, that means that it's time that we really make it clear how I feel and how the people that I'm reading and respect how they feel. So again, thank you for letting me go on a bit, but I think it's very important. We don't know what will happen in the election in November. It's always a risk. It's a possibility. It could go good, or it could go not as good. And so we need to codify the transparency. We need to codify what we as a community need out of our city council, because we can't leave it up to them. We're not in a place where we can just assume that the right thing will get done. We should codify everything we can to make for a better day in our community. And this strikes me as a very simple, good piece of example of that. So again, thank you for everybody listening to me.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Robert, you're up next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had one directed thing toward the proposal, which is because it's under state law, as Andrea mentioned, is there one of those situations where there can be no discussion of who the other party is until after the vote, as is the case in consultant contracts, for instance? I mean, speaking to John's point of transparency, when you have if this additional discussion is underway, presumably that's before somebody has already made an offer, or there's any definitive discussion about it. But after that, when you speak to the sale, is the party in question noted publicly?
Chair, committee member. So when you're looking at the 5 types of sales, in the ones that have to remain confidential are a request for proposal and a bid. So a bid, a public sale, which you would think is very public, is actually a bid process. That's the statutory mechanism. So highest bidder wins. With a request for proposal, all of those proposals, like Midtown, remain confidential under the procurement code. And so those are the 2 types that remain confidential. The city has moved forward in private sales, because private sales actually are the mechanism for, if someone submits an offer, everyone can know who that party is. It's dependent on, if we get 5 different offers, that would be on the agenda as to how many offers we've received, and the governing body would determine who that person is that we enter into an ordinance with. So that those are the mechanisms. But what I did want to explain was that the state statute is how we sell a piece of property. And so it's basically, most of the time, it's an ordinance that has to have who we're actually selling to and all those descriptors that go into it. So it's basically like a public purchase agreement that is voted on in public session. Anything before that isn't necessarily governed by state statute, other than they need to fall into one of those 5 categories: private sale, public sale, RFP process, donation or swap, or a donation under LEDA or affordable housing.
And let me add to that to try to be more precise. So by and large, we're using a private sale with a public notice, and it's our intention. I think it's very important to feed back after the deal is concluded to all the bidders, to let them know what the bids were. So feeding back to the market is an essential part of building trust within the bidding community, as well as the wider community. Can I clarify that any better? I'm sorry, I saw that.
Yes.
Well, I guess I'm still, what you're telling me is that in almost all cases, the purchaser's name will be part of the public agreement before it is acted on. So not only the council, but the public will know who the city is selling the property to.
Yeah, and as well as I'm hoping to, as a general rule, to feedback also the the unsuccessful bidders.
Right,
So
okay.
that's what point I wanted to
I
make.
see. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Do we have any more questions or comments from the committee before we finalize this agenda item? Okay, it's only a matter for discussion. So I want to thank Andrea, Sean, and Rich for your presentation and for all the comments the committee members had. Thank you. And-
Madam Chair, can I add one more thing? I just want to publicly thank Liz, Lauren, Sean, and Andrea. They helped create this website, and so I just want to say thank you to them for the work they've done to put it together. So I just want to put that in the record.
Nice job.
Yes, thank you all for that work too. So I see John clapping, very good. All right, next item is item 8, a presentation on Midtown Progress Report. Rich Brown.
Oh, thank you. Yes, party's going on. Let's see. So give me 1 second. I just need to...
Did you say the party's going on?
Yeah, I have another presentation. I'm doing presentation day today to get my
I
presentation
thought
set
you were
up.
going to have a party.
No, no, I just have a lot of presentations. I have 2 tonight, 2 more today. So I'm going to share my screen, and first I'm going to introduce Daniel Hernandez. Oh, he's here. Daniel Hernandez is our Midtown project manager, and so he's going to help me walk through this presentation. It's a truncated version of a full presentation we did at the governing body, and it's truncated just because we realized there were many more slides than we needed, but he and I will take you through sort of where we are on Midtown. Also in PrimeGov, I asked Fabian to upload the latest progress reports that we submitted on February 10th. So you have, again, lots of reading material, but they will come again, they'll start to come once every 2 weeks. We're gonna upload to our website. And we have a website for that too, another microsite. It's called midtownsantafe.com. So it's another site we've created specifically for this initiative, and hopefully you get a chance to take a look at that. But that's where all these documents will end up eventually. And let's see, so we got that. Okay, so this was based on our February progress report that we submitted to the governing body. And Daniel, I'm gonna, you can do this or I can do this, but I have you start here because as a project manager, this is what we kind of put together in the beginning.
Sure. So, hello everybody. I hope everybody is well on this cold day. I hear you guys have snow, which is great. Thank you for allowing us to make this presentation. I heard a comment again about public transparency and keeping people updated. And so, since you all are aware that the master developer and the city withdrew from the exclusive negotiation agreement, we've reestablished a strong commitment and process for making sure that a lot of the information that we're dealing with is also made public so that people can understand the kinds of questions that we have and sort of filtering them through standard development practices as well as what seems applicable for Midtown and the city of Santa Fe. As a result of the charrette, which we discussed with you in December and in January, there was some big points that were raised by the master developer who withdrew, but generally they were points that we were hearing from other developers in the marketplace. So it was a good market sounding. Since then, we've created a series of teams to address some of the issues that were raised at the charrette so that we position the property in the future for the disposition and development that we had been discussing over the past 2 years. One of the things we wanted to start out with were what were those original goals when the city acquired the site, and then again when the previous university left, and then through a series of engagement workshops in the summer of 2018, goals that were articulated by the public as well as the elected officials for what they wanted to see for the site. So we're just bringing them back to the present. People wanted to see higher education at the site. They wanted to see a variety of housing types that would be affordable to a variety of housing households with various incomes. They wanted to see the growth of the film and multimedia industry. They wanted to make sure that there was opportunities to foster and to actually have on-site community arts and cultural groups, so that we were looking at more of the sort of, again, the community arts that would differentiate itself from what I heard earlier, sort of the downtown arts, but definitely community approach, the way we thought about the long-term goals at Midtown. The elected officials and the city administration also had specific goals. They were very interested in increasing the opportunity for income at the site while reducing the operating obligations that the city currently has, which includes the bond repayment, as well as some not very high, but existing operating costs for just maintaining a piece of property. Security, just keeping the buildings tight so that if there is a future reuse for them, that the building is available for that. So the other objective was we wanted to try to at least maximize the value of the property to achieve these goals. And so the last one is on the development process. We wanted to make sure that the process itself was inclusive, transparent, that the development, future development, considered the 4 pillars of sustainability, which are equity, economy, environment, and culture. So those were some of those goals that were articulated at a very high level back in 2018. They were the goals that drove the request for proposals, also known as the RFEI, the request for expressions of interest. That was the solicitation the city issued. And then we got back the proposals and we identified a master developer to enter into an agreement to do some due diligence to take these goals into consideration as they evaluated the property. So that's the high level of where we are.
Yeah.
Here's that. Thanks, Rich. You can go ahead.
Yeah, I'll do this next one.
Yeah.
So I wanted to have Daniel sort of start off with what the goals were, and then I wanted to take you through kind of the process we've gone through right now. So this slide really sort of talks about the starting process where we created this expressions of interest based upon what Daniel had said about all the goals. We had financial, community, and long-term. We did our RFEI process. We received some solicitations. This select evaluation committee selected a master developer, and we entered into an ENA, or exclusive negotiating agreement. I think the last time I spoke to this committee, I talked about the exclusive negotiating agreement. It really is a diligence phase that we get to that says, can we do the work, project development, infrastructure, et cetera, to get to a place where we can grant a contract for this developer to dispose of this property. And as you see, there's a yellow line that says COVID-19 happened right in the beginning of all that happened. So as we went through the process of diligence, it became a issue where there were some risks that were unsustainable, and there were some issues with infrastructure, et cetera, that we needed to resolve. And so one of the things we agreed to do was to have this charrette, which is just a planning session that we had between our teams and the selected developer, to come up with the sort of frameworks almost of how we could move forward, whether it was with the developer or as the city looking at other options to go from. So at the end of the charrette, we then had a subsequent conversation with the developer, and we, at that point, mutually agreed to terminate the ENA, and that termination was based on many factors, but some of it was mainly that the financial risk and the development risk were too high for them to move forward to a point where they felt that they would receive some sort of overall financial benefit or return, because it wasn't just the developer's money, it was everyone else that they were going to. Banks were closed, or banks weren't providing money. The commercial real estate market went crash because everybody's working from home. So there were all these issues that came into play for this developer, and we had a series of conversations and came to a mutual termination, which the city council approved on the date we had on February 10th. So, Daniel, if you could take it from here and go through some of the slides about
again, this is reiterating what we've said in previous meetings with you all, that there was that based on some of the infrastructure issues, the land use zoning that needs to still happen with the master plan, and the uncertainties of the infrastructure, that there were just significant risks that the developer felt like at that time were beyond what their investment parameters would allow them or felt comfortable with. So one of the things that was taken away from that was the level of investment the city would need in order to position the property to maximize its value, to make it more attractive to developers. And what is that level of investment? And those are the questions we're dealing with right now. So you can go to the next slide, Rich. Mm-hmm. So we created this kind of visual to sort of talk about how developers see value in a development, how the marketplace does in general. So that green bar represents the total value of a development. And what goes into that is just to the right, the blue bar. So investment returns, for example, is one thing that they consider. The investors, whether you're a socially responsible investor or a purely bottom line driven, single bottom line driven investor, you're looking at some rate of return, and that scale ranges in the marketplace. But so, you know, depending on your source of financing, you play within that a little bit. So there's a little bit of guidance that's provided in the market.
Yeah.
But it's also really important for them to sort of say the higher, you know, that they also think the higher the risk, the more risky their investment. And oftentimes that risk then, that rate of return goes up when there's higher levels of uncertainty. So by reducing uncertainty, you're able to actually find that sweet spot for the investors when you're reducing risk, basically. That middle bar, the big blue bar, is our fixed development costs. There's some fluctuations when you're negotiating with your general contractor and the subcontractors and the architect's fees, et cetera. There is some negotiation you have, but again, the marketplace has pretty much determined some fixed ranges that all of those participants in the project get paid to do their work. And so then what becomes flexible in the marketplace again is the land value. So it's often called the residual land value, because these things up above are pretty much dictated by the market. That residual land value is what you have to play with and offer an owner for the sale of their property. So we wanted to put this in front of the public to understand how we evaluate proposals that come back to us when they're offering a sales price for a piece of land or even a building. Next slide. So, so again, one of the things we wanted to try to do was to try to reduce the level of uncertainty so that we could then say, look, the infrastructure is known and here's how it can be developed and here's the general cost. So as they began to sort of figure out what that middle piece is, they can then begin to determine what the residual land value is. So a city oftentimes will do everything from, you know, remediating a lot of the site conditions. So if you have environmental conditions that need to be remediated, they frequently do that before they dispose of the land, which again reduces the uncertainty of a developer buying a piece of property like, oh my God, I thought it was only going to cost $50,000 and it's now going to cost $50 million. I'm exaggerating the point, but you know the range is now clear because we've taken away the site conditions which are oftentimes environmental conditions. Oftentimes the city will want to zone it. They'll want to zone it to make sure from the public perspective that, no, you're not going to get a steel mill site there built tomorrow to a developer, but we're committed to making sure that it has these land uses that the public has said that they want. So the level of investment ranges along a curve, and the more that the city invests to create the certainty, the less risk there are for development, and therefore makes that site more attractive. Rich, the next slide. So again, like I was saying, we created these teams to address these different issues. What is the level of investment to actually put the site in a better position to dispose of, to maximize its value in the marketplace? Next slide. So we are thinking right now, and again, we'll present on the 24th. We've told the city council that we'll be making a public presentation again on the 24th. Sort of understand what are these immediate term, midterm, and possibly longer term investments that the city may want to consider based on the information we get back from these 7 teams. So the decisions haven't been made. We're working through them and we'll make recommendations and we'll give a presentation again to the city council. So the city council remains in line and the public remains in line step with us as we're thinking about the issues of investment, maximizing values, our goals. Are they purely economic? Are they more towards the community goals? And or what's that spectrum in between? And we'll be making some recommendations for how they achieve certain goals along the way. Next slide. So here's actually that slide. So you see the process goals, meaning the development process itself, the financial, economic goals, the community goals, and the more if someone said, let's put this out on the auction block tomorrow, you probably have less of a chance of achieving some of the goals because again, higher risk is going to reduce land value. Most likely not going to be able to negotiate in very many, if any, community goals. And so there's a lot higher risk from the city's from a city point of view about what it is that a market is going to actually pay for so many risks and uncertainties on the property. So minimal investment can begin to get you further along these spectrums of the goals that have been set by the governing body and the public, and starting in 2018, they continue to get refined and restated. And then finally, the more incremental development and investment you do, the higher chances of achieving goals. But because we're in such an unprecedented moment in our history, and particularly in the marketplace, I imagine that the council is going to want to deliberate along that spectrum about what level of investment they want to take. And that was, like we were saying earlier, those deliberations will happen in a public space. I think that may be the last slide.
I think that's it. Yep. That's it. Yes.
Okay, Rich, do you have anything you want to say to close your staff report?
No, I want, well, first I want to thank Daniel for articulating that press. Previously, it was our consultant from Strategic Economics who walked us through this process. But as you see, that there are many complex decisions that need to be made as we make our way to this next round. So next Wednesday is our next governing body meeting. And so what you saw in that presentation and sort of those options going through, we need to review. Additionally, we need to look at the resolution that was passed in 2018. So we need to bring that resolution forward to say, is this still the path you take? Because our council had already approved a path on a resolution that involved the eval committee and what we needed to do. So additionally, we will have the resolution in front of the council so that we can also look at the points that are there to make sure that we are following the resolution or we need to make some changes. So those are the key things I wanted to talk about. But I did want to say that going forward, we will have reports that Daniel mentioned, the 7 different areas. We'll start to put together sort of quarterly, bi-weekly reports. They won't be on all 7, but there'll be different layers of them because they all happen in a dynamic fashion. So next March, the beginning of March, we might have one on land zoning, or we might have one on infrastructure, or we might have one on public-private financing. But they will be coming out periodically, and we will be putting them in front of the governing body for discussion, and they will also be on our midtownsantafe.com, midtowndistrictsantafe.com website.
Right. If I may, Councilor, what we also did, and we'll be presenting this on the 24th too, because we're trying to get everyone scheduled. So every month, 2 things will happen. We'll issue a progress report, which will be just progress. It'll kind of be more technically oriented, but bullet points kind of stuff so that it's understandable. And then we'll make a presentation, which will be topic oriented, like Rich was saying. Public engagement. And so we'll get our DPAC team to make that presentation with Alexandra, or land use and planning, and we'll get Eli with an urban planner that's working on the master planning and zoning issues, so that they're topic oriented. They're more presentation to build public knowledge with the city council. So you'll hear from us at least twice a month on these at the council meetings, so that we're kind of just churning out lots of information to increase the knowledge base in the city.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. I'm going to open it up to the committee for any questions, comments for anyone here. I don't see any hands raised, so.
Madam Chair, I think John Fines has his hand up, yeah.
Okay, I'll go with Ryan, then John, and then Robert. Ryan, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a couple questions just regarding the Midtown campus and the infrastructure issues. I mean, I've been on the campus and I've been in the buildings and things like that. What seem to be the biggest infrastructure issues that are there? I mean, you've already got power, you've got water, you've got sewer, you've got all those things. The only thing I can think of is fiber optic. And is that the one thing that's really pushing people away? And then my second question, and I'll let you just absorb that one real quick. And then my second question is, it seems that throughout this whole process, higher education has been something that has been a request from the city, from constituents, from the city council. And so with that in mind, when we put this, the request, I'm going to call it RFP because that's traditionally what it is, the RFP out. did we advertise it in like Chronicles of Higher Education if we're wanting to pursue a higher education, or for it to be a higher education facility? Did we pursue or advertise it out on like Chronicles of Higher Education, where universities are looking to expand all over the place? I'll use like Grand Canyon University, for example, or like Kaiser University has multiple satellite campuses around the country. So did we advertise it in those places, or did we kind of keep it in more in the city and state advertising?
Madam Chair, if I could, Daniel, first, I want to say, I'll ask Daniel to respond to the infrastructure question from what he's learned so far with our study group committee. And then I'll ask Andrea to speak to your proposal question, because we're in an RFEI, and so I don't know how much we can divulge about what proposals we had or from that standpoint. So Andrea can speak to the proposal issue from your question about education and any proposals that came in, or did we go out and reach out to those folks? So Andrea, Daniel, if you could start with the infrastructure piece.
Sure. So I see Sean Moody.
Yeah, he's on there. Yeah,
I was
Sean too.
passing over to him. But
Oh,
I
you
want
are?
to start by saying that within the RFP, it was, anyway, we can talk about RFP, RFPI, but it was basically an RFP. Within the RFP, we did say that we didn't have a lot of information about infrastructure. We had some drawings, and we knew what the infrastructure was doing for, as far as supplying water, electric, gas to the existing buildings. But we knew that through a master planning process, it was most likely going to be a main trunk that we were going to have to establish off of which secondary and tertiary lines would be connected. And so we wanted to work with a master developer through that process so that we would identify the main trunk and our participation in creating that main trunk. And then most likely the developers building out the secondary and tertiary lines. Anyway, we didn't get that far along, but that's the assumption. We understand, and Sean, help me here, or maybe just take it over before I stick my foot in my mouth. But we understand that water and sewer, that there's capacity at the site. It's the gas and electric that has a lot of lacking in infrastructure. And as you know, I mean, the campus doesn't lay on a grid, so we would have to sort of figure out what that grid system would look like and the levels of investment that would have to happen. So it's also a question about what is the minimal amount of investment we would have to do in order to maximize and leverage the private investment. So, Sean.
And Ryan, I think you had focused on telecom. And actually, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, there's a little bit of feedback, but we can hear you.
I think you had asked about telecom in particular. It's actually extremely well-wired site for the general knowledge of this group and anyone else. That had been an Army base, an Army airfield at one point. And in the time they had run a lot of underground utilities. And so the campus is wired as recently as 2010 with pure fiber. And it's connected by fiber to 3 telecom companies, Comcast, CenturyLink, and Plateau. And we've also talked at length about building out the city's own municipal network to touch it for the reason. So it's extremely well connected.
Sean, I think his question really was about the electrical grid, the sewer grid, which I believe we have lots of challenges that we need to move forward. I think we're on 1 meter for all of our electricity. So if you speak a little bit to that, that'd be great to help them understand.
I think in the scheme, things are pretty well set, but for gas, we have an interesting situation with electrical and gas in that they're master metered. So that means the city's the owner of the utility on the campus, and it's very difficult for us to manage that. The gas line is aging and in bad shape, and that's the most critical need for upgrade. The electrical is actually substantially upgraded in 2010 and is very strong, but it is master metered. And then the water company utility division actually went to the trouble during the last tenure of control, which was the for-profit university, to upgrade water and sewer. So it's actually pretty good. It's not necessarily adapted for a future layout, but it's actually all but gas are actually in very good shape.
Thanks. Andrea, you want to speak to the proposal and what we may or may not be able to share?
Yeah, so first off, I mean, I think we could talk about where we publicized this RFEI. But in terms of specifics of the proposals we received, the only specifics we can give you are that there were 21 proposals in total, which included 4 categories: master developer, project developer, businesses, and tenants. And at this moment, only 3 of those have kind of been brought forward, and only 1 has been released. So until we deal with the request for expressions of interest in its totality, we really can't release very much information about that currently. But I think Liz and Daniel could probably talk about where it was.
Yeah, I was gonna ask Liz to talk about, she did the outreach. So Liz, if you could talk about what channels we went to, where we spread the RFEI message far and wide.
Certainly. So yes, we did reach out to universities. We specifically reached out to universities' planning departments, and a lot of the recommendations specifically came from constituencies. And we really like to see NYU. Arizona has a really great, really amazing. And so, and it's not just anywhere at the university. It's really specifically the planning department that we reached out to. And we also posted it on national real estate sites, as well as places where both government and higher education centers post RFPs. Yes, so we did do outreach. I'm not familiar with the real estate market. I don't know how long it takes. I think many of the conversations, particularly, I do remember with RISD, the conversations we had where they said, we really need more time to plan these things out. This isn't something with the RFEI, with the timings that you have. This isn't like the city or the university. When we say we do long-term planning, and the window that you have is not necessarily within what we need for us to plan out our university and where our expansions will be going.
And Ryan, if I could, Madam Chair, just my predecessor also had a number of conversations with specific universities that had called us and asked about how we could review or help them shape a potential proposal that could come in. So we did reach out because we knew that was one of the guideline features. And so we did hear from some, and I know that Matt Brown had a number of conversations with specific universities and his alma mater, I think, too. But we did reach out and listen to some proposals from that standpoint.
Yeah, Ryan, I think it's a good question because we were really like, how do we get this do better at this? One of the things that we thought, what we learned too, was that a lot of the universities are not necessarily interested in creating new real estate for their portfolio, but they're willing or sometimes interested in expanding like a center, a particular program in real estate development, so or whatever. But that was what we heard a lot. So it wasn't like, we went the whole campus. It was more like, we maybe think it would be cool to have a building or a small area for a particular program of their whole university. Right. And so what ultimately is, in the master developer we're working with, Santa Fe Community College and UNM were there, which was sort of an easier kind of entree to sort of say, all right, so what are the needs that what programmatic needs would you like? And in their proposal, which is public, is the film school idea from both UNM and SFCC, and then SFCC trying to figure out some initial programmatic elements of their overall campus that they would like to just place in the middle in order to attract other residents of Santa Fe that may not be interested or willing to drive out to their campus. So anyway, those were all still in discussion when we were working with them during the exclusive negotiation agreement process. But they were really great partners, actually. So anyway.
Great.
A little bit.
Thank you for that response. That's really helpful.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. John, then Robert, then Megan.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead,
John. Mr. Hernandez, I'm going to jump around to a couple of quick ideas. Mr. Hernandez, that value chart, that's exciting for me to see. Because what's happening in our community, I'm sure is a lot of people, including some people I have a lot of respect for, their knowledge and experience apropos this situation, are saying, just sell it, just sell it. Yeah. And that's been a very alarming development to me because of what I talked about earlier. When the trust erodes, when you lose confidence in your stewardship, and you're in a climate like the one we're in, the appetite for the $2 million a month, $1 million a month, the appetite to give people second chances, all that diminishes. And so that's why it's such a serious thing, hour by hour be above reproach. And so this, I'm concerned about the exhaustion in our community. It's lack of feeling that we have the money to spend to carry this thing over. And so you have that value chart, and if it can be developed in greater detail, I'd encourage you to do so, because this is the whole point of communications. It isn't to just face tough questions. It isn't just to be having everybody look under every email you write. It's to educate. I talked about winning the PR a year ago when we sat here doing this, and that's not from a crass, kind of crass, typical PR kind of way. It's because people don't know. None of us, Mr. Lurcott definitely has experience in this field, but so many in our community have never done anything like this. This is the biggest development that there will ever be in northern New Mexico from now to the end of time, maybe. And it's a big deal. It's a big opportunity. And people need, so everyone's like, oh, have affordable housing. Everybody, of course, just thinks it's easy to throw everything in there and just have it done. So the folks aren't automatically right about that, but you have to educate them. And you have to do it redundantly. You have to have many. That's why that model I talked about last week, they had all those communication touch points, not one meeting, not one city council meeting with 2 hours notice. That's not going to get it done, where everyone's questions, the councilors don't even know what their constituents want to know. So I like the looks of that value chart, and I beg you folks to save this project from the people who now want to cut and run because the Texans cut and run. That's the first order of business, is to come up with real strong fiscal reasons why we don't want to just sell this property and give up on what it can be. And don't underestimate how those voices could grow, if we continue to have bumps in the road economically and with this project. I think that's a very serious thing, but you've got the beginnings of at least some discussion to have with that value chart. And the other thing those discussions will do, they'll bring out ideas. You might think you've heard all the ideas, and I know you're talking to the best people, but I just came up when I saw people in the paper just the other day talking about cutting and running and just selling it. I put my thinking cap on and came up with what I think is a pretty visionary idea. Now, maybe it's hopeless. Maybe smarter people than me will say, well, we can't do it because of A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z. But it's an idea I haven't heard bandied about. It's got tremendous potential, and it would involve a partner with unlimited pockets. So who knows how many of those ideas are out there in our community that could take this thing down the trail. Now, in looking at the report this morning, and we got it a little late, but I did have a chance to peruse it. They cite traffic issues with not in my backyard businesses, which concern me greatly, but those must have always existed. They talk about the asbestos. Everybody deals with asbestos these days, and that should have been pretty much known. And then the public housing piece, they think, is making it fiscally untenable. Obviously, there's going to be great hue and cry in our community around that. I don't think that it should be an all or nothing proposition, but we already knew about our public housing need and the desire to have it represented some kind of way in this development. So this doesn't have to be a big discussion, but I'm a little unclear why we needed 6 to 8 months to come to the conclusion that these things were untenable for this developer that we put all our eggs in their basket. Didn't these things already exist? And number one. Number two, I want to focus on the traffic piece. Okay. How serious is it that there's no ingress and that the businesses have put their foot down and saying, not in my backyard? That's the piece I'll focus on in addition to that macro, and then I'll have one or two quick. Thank you.
Madam Chair and Daniel, I just want to say one thing before Daniel respond. Member Find, I just want to say one thing. Keep in mind that the exclusive negotiating agreement allowed us not to put all our eggs in one basket. It was a diligence process. They did not have control and a contract to dispose or make anything with the property. So we were thankful that we did go through this E&A period. So, but I just want to let everybody know that the exclusive negotiating agreement allowed us to have this period of discovery. And that through this discovery, we realized that one, they had risk issues. Two, Daniel's going to talk about the traffic issues, but but it did not put us into a place where, oh my God, now we can't turn back because now we have this group that's saying, I'm not going to pay for that, or I need $30 million to get this done. So I just want to make that clear that the ENA was used to due diligence, but did not allow them to put, us to have all our eggs in one basket. So
your questions are, I don't know what to say other than they're right on. I think, I mean, to be transparent, I think a lot of these, their comments in their report were anecdotal, and they were assumptions based on some preliminary conversations they've had with local businesses that surround the site. I think that it wasn't, I don't think that it was analyzed at a level that we would have liked to have seen and have been involved with them in that process. But I think it was them identifying just a laundry list of issues they felt like were challenges, coupled with some of the on-site challenges and uncertainties that they felt like this mix, when you throw them all in one bowl, doesn't feel comfortable from our investment strategy. So what we're doing and what we'll present to you, one of our topics will be land use and planning. What we'll present is a sort of, here are the major issues. So yes, it is a landlocked site. How do you increase connectivity, access to the site? And maybe it doesn't happen tomorrow, and we don't have to provide a guarantee to a developer that's going to happen tomorrow, but it may happen over a period of time so that we identify these places around and around the site to increase connectivity. As you probably know, there are surrounding communities that will have comments about that. So it's just, it's a process that we have to take gradually, systematically, and it doesn't have to happen overnight, but it's probably one of those things you put on a trajectory of, first that site, that one looks easy, let's get it. And everyone knows that we're trying to acquire through a land swap the state parcel. So that'll allow for some connectivity. So just kind of building a momentum on these prime moments of connectivity around the site, I think would be helpful for both the public to understand, like, ultimately this maybe it's just a pedestrian and bikeway, or maybe it's a, an automobile. So those things will be prioritized, but we'll talk about those in a in a site planning and land use presentation. I think I'm trying to schedule it for March.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it's
I can't remember what it is. It's within the next 2 months, because I want to put public engagement as one of the upcoming presentations as well. But it'll be either public engagement or land use will come first.
Right, so it's not as existential as it appears to see a developer say, well, these two guys say not in my backyard, we can't get in.
Yeah.
Okay. Very quickly, the Albuquerque Journal is doing a lot better reporting on this than the Santa Fe New Mexican, which is mind-blowing to those of us who were in government a couple of years ago and couldn't cough without covering our mouths and having it not be a front or second page article. I don't know whether you're lucky or not. Actually, an engaged press, as annoying as they are, as we've learned, is a big part of democracy and actually makes us better. So what I'm saying is the ABQ Journal a couple of weeks ago had La Hacienda's report. And I was very interested to read the charrette and the summary that you provided us today, and I'm going to look at it much more carefully in the days ahead. But without necessarily asking you to go into details, will there be any surprises in that support if the New Mexican or somebody publishes it, or it comes out as it will, that aren't in what we got today? And again, you don't have to go into details if you're uncomfortable doing that, but is there a gap between SIEDA's report and what you?
No, I think that the issues that were brought up, highlighted by the developer, issues that we had known already. We just wanted to work in collaboration with the developer to overcome. But so I think what the press has sometimes the ability to do is intensify or exaggerate a concern. I feel like there's stuff that we can just begin chipping away at. And again, it'll go back to the city council ultimately for them to deliberate on what levels of investment before they want to dispose to achieve these goals. But I feel like it's just a matter of chipping away at these things. And what we'll be advising the city council is, like, what is the minimal amount of investment that maximizes the value of the land, meaning a reduction in the uncertainties and risk. So those are the things we kind of, like, if you spend $1, you may make $2. If you spend that $1, it might not make that much difference. So we want to make sure that we're giving the city council and the public a series of recommendations.
Okay, and finally, I'm just curious, did we identify a case study or two or three that we are modeling after, learning from, any of that? You know, when I embark on something, you know, and every case is different, of course, but when I'm embarking on something for a startup or trying to launch something, I do a lot of diligence in seeing, okay, who's been down this road? What ideas can I steal? Anything? Well, how can I learn from those who've trod before me? Did we identify a development, whether or not it had a strong cry for public housing? Hopefully it would, but what have we identified that's out there in the past? I don't care, pick a number, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, in a community like ours, or maybe a community smaller or larger, but some kind of case studies have we identified that we are using for best practices and things that we don't want to do?
Another great question, and yes, we did, and we didn't do it in a public forum, but we used it as at the charrette when we had the charrette in December with KDC Sienda and the city, and I was the one that presented it because I've worked on projects like this, and so a big question is, what do you do with a site that was never used as a neighborhood, but it's surrounding infrastructure, but just no grid here? And I use the example of a project I worked on in Pittsburgh. It was an old steel mill, and how we phased the infrastructure. We designed the infrastructure up front, but phased it over a period of time so we knew where we were going over time. I did a project in Denver, which was the early mid-2000s. Market was still really slow, if you can believe that about Denver at that time, but the market was still really slow. But it was a mixed-use development. It had affordable housing in it, and as well as commercial. So and it was an amusement park. So again, no infrastructure to support a neighborhood. So I presented those two as big examples that I had worked on, so I was able to respond to questions about them. And so, yeah, so we used some precedent, but we didn't do a public presentation. I did it under the umbrella of what is sustainable urban development today? And what does it really mean and include? So I use those as just kind of examples.
Yeah. Well, Madam Chair, if I could, Member Fines, I also want to ask Daniel to talk about, as we've gotten to this current state, we've also found another example of a development in Richmond, California, that is as a model for us moving forward. So and we're hoping to present that at I don't know what date the council meeting is, but we found this new Richmond, California model of exactly what's happened. Developers out, depressed economy, buildings that are great to use, buildings that are not great to use. And so we will also bring that forward as another way that we're looking at the template moving forward. So, and Daniel will talk about that in one of our upcoming.
Yeah, it'll either be March or April, and Eli and Opticos, who's the urban planner on our team, will be presenting it publicly. So yeah.
Well, that's
calendar up, when.
You guys know your business better than I do, but that kind of storytelling with specifics, I think that could go a long way in our community. We only have the rail yard as anything resembling an analog, and there are those who feel that fell far short of what it could have been, and we still have the parking issues and whatnot. So, provide us a narrative, give us details. Go for it big time with that stuff. Spend the extra hours. And I know you know that and you're hearing that, but don't underestimate, for those of us who haven't been through big developments and think that Santa Fe is an island of its own and have to other communities or whatever the head trip might be, or they want to cut and run, whatever the people's head trips are, use narrative, use details, and bring this thing home in a great way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next, Robert. You need to unmute.
Technology. First of all, I'm confused about whether we are at a point of starting over a new process or whether we are sort of dropping down to the next group of people who submitted earlier. I asked that question because it seems to me it's an opportunity that you can adjust the system and the process to my way of thinking, to get back to where you started it, which was a sort of broad community-based process. And it seemed to be a disconnect between that, for instance, the South Side workshop, what is it, 2 years ago now, and then into the process you started about a year or so ago, which struck me, of all of the goals that were mentioned, it seemed to me the driving goal was the financial one, to get the property sold, to get the costs of carrying the property off the city's back. That was the thing that was most important, which is certainly a factor. But it seems to me all the other goals that were mentioned were much more into what is the long-term value of this property to this community. And, with a lot of other, the sustainability goals and the community goals, it just strikes me that it ought to be, we ought to try and redo that. I agree with John that the let's sell it now and run is a bad idea. I wasn't sure who that consultant was who proposed those three alternatives that was mentioned in the paper story. I mean, it was to city council: sell a property right away, long-term, midterm development. So one question is, who is that consultant?
Their name is Strategic Economics, and they work on similar types of projects with cities and large, authorities, like a utilities company have major properties that they want to dispose of, and help them figure out what their goals are and then how to dispose of it.
Is that a new group, or is that one of the ones we hired earlier?
We hired them last. They probably been around since
last June, around last June.
Okay.
In the spring or so.
Or a little earlier than that, I'm sorry, probably 2019.
Yeah, I think it was 2019.
Date, but yeah.
Well, my belief is that we should, look at the long term, and it may take 5 years or better to get rid of the property overall. I also believe that kind of turning it over in the planning of it, turning it over primarily to developers is not going to be the best way to get a product that has community orientation to it. My experience is developers are not very good at things like transportation and planning and open space, thinking of it in a community way. Yeah. Developers' first thought is, what tenants can I get? And they tend to be driven by that. And so you end up with 2 or 3 tenants, major tenants, who want certain things, and the plan, whatever it is responsive to that. I believe that it would be better to have a kind of skeletal plan, at least, done by the city up front, that says we want these connections to be made through the site to the community. And we want this kind of public space that works and connects to the community. And I think that takes a look at it that's different from a developer. And from my experience too, developers like if the city comes and said, here's what we want. And you tell them up front what you want, and you don't do a gotcha at the back end when they've already done all their financial calculations.
Right.
So I would argue that. The next thing is, I think you need to restore, in my judgment, the transparency system, where you have, get the community involved. I know there were meetings every couple of weeks. I learned those from Liz's updates, but it was very hard to get connected with those. And I don't think it was something that a citizen would be able to find easily to get a sense of real participation in it. I really think that needs to be recast. And the housing part of it, I think, is a real issue. It's clearly something that's been high on everybody's list conceptually, but how you pull that off when you're trying to convince a developer that this is a good financial deal for him is a real question. And my view is that there ought to be a housing strategy, affordable housing strategy within the larger context. And that's going to be, to me, a part that the city is going to have to do much more about. I mean, one question is, do you want to use this opportunity where you own the land and you can therefore reduce the cost of housing if you want, to make this a real center for affordable housing? Or whether you want to say, well, we want to make housing that the people, that the businesses in the development can use to attract their employees. It's a different strategy, and it just needs to be thought through. And then the question too that was brought up a while back, what is the community impact initiative, about the impact of this development and housing in this development on the surrounding communities, and whether you're going to be gentrifying some fairly fragile communities on the edge. So that all of that says to me that there ought to be a kind of subset of the planning function to look at a housing strategy that is going to ensure we can get something of value toward our goal of affordable housing as part of this project. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, next is Megan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to comment really quickly with Mr. Cordova's questions regarding higher education. The Santa Fe HEC and Santa Fe Community College did partner with KDC Sinida in the RFEI. And in my role as the interim director of the HEC, I was talking to Matt Brown before he moved on about his ideas for higher education at the Midtown campus. I would say that the pandemic has created a seismic shift in higher education just overall. And so to reinforce Daniel's point, I don't see those four-year universities having the appetite to actually build an institution or own a building at the Midtown going forward, just because the costs around higher education are changing so dramatically. And then the other thing that I'd like to just shout out for my people here in New Mexico is, some of those external universities don't offer the invitation to New Mexicans. There are so many students from Santa Fe who graduate high school and don't go to college. And from my perspective at the HEC and from Santa Fe Community College, we see it as an equity issue that we have an opportunity to really remedy. And so our vision for the Midtown and access to higher education is expanding the invitation to education, letting our students know that you don't have to be any old way in order to go to college. You just show up in the clothes you're in and you're fine. We're going to take care of you and you're going to get to where you need to go. You don't have to, and I think so many, I'm born and raised in Santa Fe, and I felt excluded from the opportunity of higher education. But, we can all do it. We all have the grit to do it. New Mexicans are survivors. And so my pitch is, as we look at the higher education solutions that evolve on the Midtown, to really focus and champion our homegrown solutions that look to really build up our community where we are, instead of looking for solutions that are going to come rescue us from the outside, because we're independent people and we don't like it when people tell us what to do. And so I needed to make my pitch that there's a plan and it's going to be awesome. It's going to be so good. And let's talk about it because it's going to be great. My question is around, I have two questions, one around the RFEI. I think one of the opportunities for the RFEI going forward is to table the RFEI and create a different process. So my question is, what is the temperature reading on that possibility? And my second question is, I understand the city asked for $10 million from legislative session for the Midtown. And if that goes through, what will that funding be used for? Thank you.
Andrea, do you want to do the RFEI one?
Yeah,
sure. I will start that off. Chair, committee members. So currently, because of the RFEI structure, we have an evaluation committee that makes recommendations to the governing body. That evaluation committee is currently meeting and evaluating, what their recommendation is going to be. But as your discussions have illuminated, there are a lot of different moving parts. And, Daniel has constructed a group of people, internal along with external, to really figure out and strategize what are the things we need to know to move forward, and how is that going to help us move forward. So I guess the quick answer is I don't really know what that looks like yet until that recommendation comes to governing body, and it might be a partial recommendation. It might be a recommendation for more information. But behind the scenes, staff is working very hard to try to come up with solutions and offer information both in public and via reports, but trying to find solutions. And I think that is the best answer that I can give you right now.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Madam Chair, I think she asked about the CapEx and the legislature.
Well, I can't recall, we often put monies in there because they're left over from the last legislative session where we didn't get the funds. So I'm happy to get more detail. I would just be right now guessing as to what we have put in there. I don't know that there's been any action on that yet in the legislature, but I can also find that out as well and get back to you, Megan. Okay.
Madam Chair, I was going to say that I could do the same thing because it comes through Public Works. So I can talk to the Public Works folks, and then the next, probably in a month from now, we'll do another update like this. But at the next one, I will make sure that we add it into our deck. So session will be over.
That's right. What did I see in the paper? Like 31 more days.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all for that. Robert, you have your hand up again. Did you want to ask another question?
Yes, Madam Chair. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I already had my time.
Oh, you got more time now.
I realized that I sort of ran over my question, of which is, are we starting over in terms of a process, or are we still kind of in the process we had before? Andrea's commentary suggests we're still in the process that we've had before. And I guess I'd be interested to know that. And also, from my point of view, is there any way to get out of it? Can we start again, or are we stuck there?
Chair, committee member, so right now we're in the process that we're in. And the only way is to cancel the RFEI. That could be a recommendation. There are a lot of different recommendations. I did explain there's 21 proposals, and so there is some potential work that needs to go into making that recommendation. But if the RFEI is canceled, then potentially a new process would start. But it's just a lot of work to kind of get to that decision right now, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. The final one, Madam Chair, is what do you see our role as being in this process as it moves forward? So far, it seems like we get an update and it's pretty much all we know about, and then it moves on. And it seems to me it ought to be, it's obviously the priority project in economic development. And if we have any role, it ought to have something to do with this project, but I'm not sure.
Well,
Madam Chair, go ahead.
I'll just say, I'll go back to the discussion we had at the last meeting where we had a kind of an overview of economic development and this committee's role. And I heard loud and clear that this committee wants to have more of a role, more of a say-so. And that is the road that I tend to embark on. I think our director, Rich Brown, certainly heard the same discussion. Hence, we have the agenda that we have today. It is an economic advisory committee, and so it doesn't preclude us from taking votes on matters to express your opinion to the governing body. And so it doesn't bind the governing body to what this committee decides, but I think it's a very good voice to have on items that affect economic development in general. And certainly this project is one of them. We have been getting reports from on Midtown from Rich Brown and Daniel Hernandez, and I think that's very much appreciated as we go forward. And this body wants to make more of an impact. I certainly am open to any phone calls or emails you want to make with your opinions, and then from there, we work on an agenda. So, but I hear loud and clear that this committee definitely wants to be an active participant in Midtown, certainly since it's before us as we go forward. And so that's how I plan to operate, and I'll turn it to Rich to see what you have to say about this.
Well, Madam Chair, I'm actually in agreement with you. I think that this body, who oversights the Economic Development Committee, is essential to provide, I think, advisory to our counselor, Fiscal Coupler. She comes before the governing body and can speak to what her actual committee has to say about maybe her vote, or maybe what the public needs to hear if they're not listening today. So I think that she's correct that this body definitely needs a voice, and that's why I had mentioned earlier that on a monthly basis that you will get some update on our progress and where we're going. But I think that your voice also lends a hand to Councilor Fiscal Coupler as she speaks in front of the governing body and the public as it relates to matters on Midtown.
Okay, thank you, Rich. Robert, is that the end of your question?
You're on mute.
Yes, it is. I appreciate that. That's
okay. Thank you. Any other? Oh, Megan, you have your hand up again.
Just really quickly, since I know we're at the end of our time, but I was reviewing the powers of this committee and noticed that one of our powers is we can create a one-year strategic plan. So I thought perhaps maybe even in a subcommittee meeting, but there might be some value in this group trying to focus what we would like our goals to be, and that might help us shape how we can best support the city.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. And I'll talk with Rich about how we can move more toward that goal.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I was thinking that's a good question. I think that April was kind of the time period I wanted to get that started with this committee.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rich. Any other hands up? I don't see any before we close this agenda item. All right, well, it's been a very productive discussion. I've learned a lot too about how committee members view items, and I think it's a very good, healthy, informative discussion. So thank you. I want to have the committee indulge me, if you will. I want to go back to item 7A, where we discussed already the resolution I have forward. On the agenda, and we've received, after asking for advice from our city attorney that's present, we received information where we can, as a body, vote on this. There was some discussion about item 7 itself, because it says action items discussion. So I wasn't quite sure that we could vote on this, but we can. So without going further, because I think we did exhaust the discussion, does anybody want to make a motion to approve the consideration of this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the resolution regarding the communication on the sale of land. So Fabian, I believe you're still on. Would you please call for the voice vote?
Absolutely. Councilor Joanne Vigil Coppler,
Yes?
Melissa Coleman,
Yes.
Megan McGarity,
Yes.
Ryan Cordova,
Yes.
John Fines,
Yes.
Ryan Gallagher, Robert Lurcott,
Affirmative.
Kate Kennedy,
Yes.
Joanna Nelson,
Yes.
Victoria Murphy.
Yeah.
Looks like the vote was unanimous, Councilor.
Thank you, Fabian. The next item is item 9, members from staff. Rich, do you have any items?
I've updated myself to death today, but I don't have any other updates today, except one I do. I'm sorry, I have one. Tonight I am at the Quality of Life Committee meeting, just to talk about community development. So it starts at 5 p.m. If you'd like to attend. It's going to be on YouTube, but I am there that evening to talk about community development as a major department. So, so I'm back on stage later this evening.
You're back on Hollywood Squares.
I am, yes. I got a kid at school and a dog barking behind me, but other than that.
Okay, any other items from anybody on staff that wants to make mention of anything? Okay, next, matters from the committee. Anyone have anything you'd want to add? Okay. Seeing none, matters from the chair. I don't have anything. I appreciate all the discussion today and look forward to when we meet again. We don't have a date. I know that Fabian.
March 10th.
It's March 10th? Okay,
Yes.
there it is, March 10th. So put it on your calendars. And I guess after all this discussion, I think it's time we adjourn. Thank you all for being here very much.
Thanks.
Be safe out there.
Thanks.